Have you ever avoided riding through certain areas or on certain roads because of the general motoring lawlessness there? I certainly have. Now I refuse to ride through my home city of Bradford anymore because it's just too dangerous for an ageing motorcyclist like me. Now, as some of you know, a couple of days a week I have a little van delivery job in and around Bradford, and I routinely see things which make me feel very glad that I'm not on a bike. Cars being driven recklessly and often at ludicrous speeds through traffic, with no regard for the safety of other road users. It's just not safe for a motorcycle, and I really feel for those few who are compelled to commute on two wheels in that location. Now, I've no doubt that the authorities' official line will talk about the importance of reporting such incidents, taking all such reports seriously, urging the taking of registration numbers and the use of dashcam footage, etc. But I'm willing to bet that even if a number plate is to be had, things won't result in a positive outcome. Trust me, I've been there. I was a road traffic police officer in Bradford in the mid-90s. We would regularly park up in hotspots for bad driving, and any vehicle being driven in a dangerous manner would have a traffic car on its tail and would be stopped and dealt with face to face. I see no evidence of this approach today, and it saddens me. But why is it so? I'm often asked what it was like policing a big city in the UK in the 80s and 90s. Now, there's a school of thought which has it that the core functions of the police have not changed in any meaningful way since the formation under Robert Peel of the Metropolitan Police in London in 1829. At its most basic level, this holds true. The primary duties of the police have always been the protection of life and property, the prevention and detection of crime, and the maintenance of public order. This was the very first thing we were taught as young men and women embarking upon a career which would test us in ways we could never have imagined as we stood reciting the oath before a magistrate in an old, dusty courtroom. But I look back now at a time when, as frontline officers, we had real clarity about our duties and responsibilities. The lines of demarcation were clearly drawn in our minds, and we seldom, if ever, wandered off the path laid upon those core principles. The protection of life and property, the prevention and detection of crime, and the maintenance of public order. It was those principles, together with an unqualified and unquestioning belief in the unified chain of command, which guided us. Discipline and professionalism. So, whereas I believe that these principles are still in the bedrock upon which policing is based today, the manner in which they find expression is very different. And here's why. Policing and police training in the 1980s was still largely modelled around military service. Many serving officers were the children of World War II servicemen, and so it's not hard to see why these influences were front and centre of police culture. This is no longer the case today, and as a consequence we have a service which is less effective, less respected, and less proud to serve as it was just 4 decades ago. Now, I should point out that there are, of course, very many very brave, very professional police officers serving in today's forces across the country. certainly the vast majority. But to my mind, they're not supported, guided, and above all led as they used to be. That's not their fault. It's a tired old cliche, but there are today far too many lions being led by donkeys. Now, I'm not saying that all ranking officers are donkeys. Far from it. After all, I was one myself. But I am convinced that the clarity which we had as young constables at the sharp end back in the 80s is largely lost to today's service. Priorities have become skewed, notions of high standards of public service have become buried under a mountain of confusing bureaucracy, and police leaders have become less commander and more manager. So how has this situation come about? Well, like most unhealthy developments, it has evolved and grown over time. I have it in mind that I sort of first became aware of these changes at some point in the 90s. I struggle to remember exactly when. But marked police vehicles in my city began to appear sporting the corporate logos of a well-known double glazing company. There was also a period around about the same time, perhaps a little earlier, when the force crest displayed on these vehicles had been redesigned, and the crown, which features on all constabulary crests, had been removed. Now this caused many a raised eyebrow at the time, and eventually the crown was restored to the force crest. But you can see here the direction in which some people were trying to take policing. They were trying to remove a proud history of Crown and State service and replace it with a facile, shallow identity more aligned to private corporations. They went soft. The public suddenly stopped being the public and became customers. And that's where the rot began to set in. Quite what the customers, were supposed to think about the impartiality of a police service advertising a double glazing company on the response vehicles, I'll never know. After some years, this particular act of stupidity was reversed. If you want my view, a marked police vehicle signage should be confined to the word police, the force crest, the crown, and whatever high visibility livery is appropriate. End of. I noticed recently that many of these vehicles now are sporting slogans such as dementia friendly. What does that even mean? The oath of the office of constable requires the holder of that office to serve the public impartially without fear or favour. Why do we need some vehicles marked this way? Are we to infer that some response vehicles have crews better equipped to deal with people with dementia than do others? Individually, these things may not seem to amount to anything, but collectively they point to a service which seems to have lost its sense of purpose. If you need a sign on your cars to tell people that you have principles which should be taken for granted anyway, then all you do is give voice to your own doubts about having those principles in the first place. It's all so depressingly superficial. Back in the 80s, we policed the city in numbers, the vast majority on foot patrols in all the busy areas, highly visible and highly approachable. Anybody who put a foot wrong got dealt with right there and right then. The public felt safe, and therefore we were respected and trusted. Now, there's nothing new about public voices calling for more policing presence on the streets, a prompt response to a 999 call, an effective investigation into a robbery, burglary or assault. But the reason that those voices have increased in both volume and frequency is, at least in part, down to a near criminal neglect of police funding, which started in 2010 on the back of the Comprehensive Spending Review and the beginning of this age of austerity. Over 20,000 police officers lost over a period of time when the population increased by several millions. Absolute madness. And add to this general shambles a panicked rush to restock police numbers in recent years has resulted in an inevitable drop in recruitment standards. I hear now that some forces do not even hold a face-to-face interview prior to appointment, and that candidate vetting consists of a light touch at best. When I applied to join the police way back in 1982, along with every other applicant, I had to go through a rigorous process. Having got through the initial paper application, looking at school qualifications and job experience, if any, I had to attend the main police station in Bradford and undertake a lengthy entrance examination based on English, maths and general knowledge. The minimum height requirement to join the then West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police was 5'9" for men. At 6'1" I was fine, but I also had to demonstrate a minimum chest expansion of 2.5 inches on breathing in. I kid you not. Along with a certain weight to height ratio. Any need to wear glasses or any colour blindness was also a bar to joining. I had neither of those issues. Boxes ticked. Then, having been notified that I'd passed the entrance exam and medical, I underwent a vetting process. This included the following: written references from my employer and a personal visit by a police inspector, no less, to my place of work to interview both my supervisor and my manager. There were also personal police visits and interviews over a period of weeks for the following: my parents, my girlfriend, my girlfriend's parents, my sister and her husband, who was also a serving police officer, my uncle and aunt, our neighbours on both sides, my bank manager, and my former form heads at school. And after this process had run its course, I received a personal visit at home from an inspector and a sergeant. It was a grilling, but they did enjoy the tea and biscuits courtesy of my mum. After successfully clearing all these hurdles, I was eventually invited to a long face-to-face interview at Force Headquarters with a chief inspector and a superintendent. I was astonished how much they already knew about me, including the exact size of my bank overdraft. Anyway, I eventually received a letter confirming my success and appointment, and was appointed the following year, no doubt to allow a few months to pass to see if I would maintain my vetting status. So you see, back then there was baked into the system a sense of duty and professionalism right from the very first inquiry to join, up to being appointed, completing 2 years training and setting out for the first time as a fully confirmed constable. Training itself was regimented, consisted of months of written exams and physical tests, with the very real possibility of falling at any one of these hurdles. My initial 14 weeks training consisted of bulling boots, pressing creases into uniforms, marching everywhere, and endless hours of study, all in residence many miles from home at a district training centre, which was actually a Royal Air Force base loaned for the purpose by the Ministry of Defence to the Home Office. Now, I'm sure that you don't need me to tell you that today's approach is very different, and I'll just leave it at that. But if you want to know why those cars are rampaging unchallenged through many of our streets, why your reports of crime are not investigated, why your 999 calls are not responded to, it's because those fundamental principles so embedded in the policing of the 80s have not just been lost, they've been thrown away. I'll say